In the dark of night, you fear the monsters will kick down your door. But me? My monster wears an apron, bakes cookies, kisses my cheek, and calls me, Mom. This is not just a story. This is the obituary of a love that has died. The tale of how protection turned into cold handcuffs, how a vacant gaze became the cruelest form of abuse, and how silence became my only survival strategy. I, Linda Carter, once thought the bitterest revenge was rage, but in the end I learned the hardest revenge is not anger. It is your stubborn rebuilding of your life. Because, my dear friend, healing the wounds of the heart, that is the quietest battle you will ever win in your life. Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. My name is Linda Carter. I'm 67 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I used to think that when you raise a child, you teach them gratitude the same way you teach them to cross a street. Hand in hand, look both ways. Step when it's safe. I was wrong. I raised a fox and called him my son, and I didn't realize it until the teeth were already at my throat. Evening in Phoenix turns every kitchen into a furnace. The swamp cooler only moved the heat around. The air shimmered, thick enough to taste. A pot of water simmered on the stove. Cheap pasta, 5 boxes for $1. Robert used to say, salt makes anything taste like home. Since he died, I still do it. Habit is its own kind of prayer. Ethan showed up with 2 duffels and the smell of hot asphalt. No hug, no smile. He just scanned the room the way a man sizes up something he intends to manage. Then he sat in Robert's chair, his father's chair, and looked at me like he was about to hand down instructions. "From now on, Mom," he said, voice flat as a bank form, "your pension goes straight to my account. You don't need anything, just a corner to rest." My hand found my wedding ring. There's a small dent in it, from when Robert slipped it on too fast under courthouse lights 40 years ago. I rubbed that dent until my fingers stopped shaking. I didn't argue. Sometimes silence is the only armor you have left. He ate like he was racing a clock, tapping his phone between bites. I watched the steam rise and vanish. "I'll handle the bills," he added. "Less for you to worry about." His tone made it sound like generosity, but it felt like inventory. After dinner, he claimed the spare room that had been Robert's office. I washed dishes, one by one, until the water ran clear and quiet. Somewhere between the soap bubbles and the silence, I remembered what Jordan Reeves, the lawyer, had told me last week. Your husband left you structure. I hadn't understood it then. Now the word echoed in the empty kitchen like a password I might someday need. At 10:30, the fridge door slammed. Then again. "What the hell?" Ethan's voice was sharp enough to wake the neighborhood. Mrs. Delgado's porch light flicked on across the street, her unspoken check-in. I walked to the doorway. The fridge light fell across a few eggs, pickles, butter curling at the edges of its wrapper. I'd been learning the math of one person. Half loaves, smaller milk, a pantry that didn't echo. Ethan turned, eyes flaring. "What did you do?" "When people are hungry," I said quietly, "they usually respect the hands that feed them." His jaw flexed. "You did this on purpose, trying to guilt trip me? Or you could go to the store. It's 3 blocks. "With what money?" he snapped. "With mine," I didn't say. His phone buzzed again. He turned away, muttering about responsibility and planning, words that sounded borrowed from someone else's vocabulary. Inside me, something small began to settle. A weight, but also a decision. I stepped out onto the porch. The desert night had cooled to something bearable. The air smelled faintly of dust and rain that wouldn't come. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my shoulders, not because I was cold, but because I wanted the feeling of something holding me that didn't ask for anything back. It would have been easy to call it defeat, to give in, because I was tired and the world kept shrinking around me. But I've lived long enough in the desert to know nothing truly dies here. It just waits for the right rain. My phone lay face down on the table. I turned it over, the glow lighting my hands. Contacts appeared. May, the friend who never forgets my birthday, the dentist I still owe money to. And there, Jay Reeves, quiet name, solid letters, the lawyer who had said structure. Inside, another cupboard slammed. He was still performing authority for an audience that didn't exist. You'll find out, I whispered, not to him, but to myself. Maybe to Robert. Maybe to the night. My thumb hovered over the call button beside Jordan's name, but I didn't press it. Not yet. You don't light a desert fire in daylight. You wait until the dark agrees to keep your secrets. I locked the screen and set the phone down. The wind stirred the tin bells under the eaves. Their thin chimes sounded like courage, if you'd been hungry for it long enough. Inside, he paced, muttering about order, opening and closing doors like a metronome of control. We were only a few hours into this new arrangement, and already it felt like a cage I'd built myself. Shame tried to creep in, whispering that I'd failed as a mother, that this was the bill for every soft moment, every yes that should have been a no. I let it speak for a heartbeat, then let it go. You can't pay shame and also pay rent. Tomorrow, I told myself, would bring paperwork, forms, maybe a call. But tonight, I took inventory, a house still standing, a dented ring that remembers love, a green folder on my dresser with tabs like guardrails, a lawyer who speaks like safety, a neighbor's light that flickers when things sound wrong, a friend who won't ask why I stayed so long, and me, still here, breathing, spine intact. I reached for the phone again. My thumb grazed Jay Reeves. Then I set it down. Timing is everything. Cooks know it, surgeons know it, and so do women who decide to start living again. Inside, the refrigerator door thunked shut. Across the street, Mrs. Delgado's light blinked twice and went dark. A small blessing. The wind caught the bells again, their song soft but certain. You'll find out, I said one last time, barely above a whisper. Then I powered off my phone, let the porch boards cool beneath my feet, and watched the desert swallow the heat of the day. People imagined loss as noise, sirens, crying, collapsing knees, but mine came in the hush between elevator dings at St. Mary's Hospital. One moment, he was breathing through a tired smile. The next, there was a silence so total it rewrote the air. The nurse whispered condolences. I nodded like I was confirming an order. The funeral came 3 days later, beneath a white Arizona sky that refused to dim, even for the dead. The heat pressed down, thick and metallic. Black clothes clung to skin like apology. Ethan arrived late, sunglasses too dark, expression too calm. When he hugged me, it felt rehearsed. He's in a better place, he said. I know, I answered. But I was thinking, so am I. That thought shamed me then. It doesn't now. Robert had been sick for a long time, slowly, methodically, like a man walking backward into fog. I'd spent years caring for both him and the version of Ethan that always needed bailing out. When the coffin sank, I felt the strangest thing. Relief, shaped like guilt. After the service, The guests dispersed in polite whispers. The pastor murmured prayers about peace. I didn't hear him. I watched dust settle on the casket and thought about how much of life is just waiting for someone to stop fighting what's already gone. A week later, I sat in Jordan Reeves's office, where the air smelled like polished wood and faint lemon oil. The ceiling fan turned slowly, whispering against the heat outside. Jordan, young, sharp, but with the kind of quiet that fills a room, adjusted his glasses and opened a file with my husband's handwriting on the cover. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently. "Robert planned ahead." The phrase sent a tremor through me. Of course he did. Robert had always been the kind of man who left flashlights near every outlet in case of blackout, who labeled storage boxes even after 40 years in the same house. Jordan slid a stack of papers toward me. "Your husband left a protective will. Everything, home, pension, savings, remains solely under your name. And there's a clause. If anyone, including family, contests it, all assets are redirected to the Phoenix Children's Foundation." The air shifted. "Even Ethan?" I asked. He nodded. "Especially Ethan." I couldn't speak for a long moment. I pressed my fingertips into the folder, feeling the weight of ink and foresight. Robert had known. Jordan leaned forward slightly. "He anticipated pressure. He told me to make sure you had structure." His exact word. That word again. The one that had echoed in my kitchen the night Ethan came home. "He always did the quiet work," I murmured. Jordan smiled faintly. "He loved you in the details, Mrs. Carter." Outside the window, sunlight glared off parked cars. I caught my reflection in the glass, hair pinned too tight, eyes older than last week. Grief hadn't softened me. It had clarified me. I left the office with a green folder pressed to my chest, as if it could anchor me in a windstorm. The walk to the parking lot felt longer than usual. My legs trembled, not from weakness, but from the sudden understanding that I was free, and that freedom was heavier than fear. The word repeated in my head all the way home. Freedom. That evening, I poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite iced tea, half lemon, half mint, and sat on the porch as dusk washed over the street. The house was quiet, too quiet. My reflection looked back at me through the window, unfamiliar. I whispered into the dark. "You planned for this, didn't you, Robert?" A single wind chime answered. I thought about Ethan's face at the funeral, how he'd looked not at his father's coffin, but at the family car, always measuring what was left to take. A car passed by, breaking my trance. I glanced down at my phone, scrolling through old messages, condolences, church reminders, a few from May checking if I'd eaten. Then one new text blinked across the screen. "Ethan, need to crash for a few days. Be there in 20. My heart stuttered. For a second, I read it wrong. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe he'd changed. Maybe grief had grown him into something softer. But when the porch light flickered over the driveway, I felt the old dread rise again. The same cold in my spine from the night of the empty fridge. I looked at the green folder beside me, its edges worn from my grip. The faint scent of lemon oil still clung to the paper. Robert's handwriting was neat on the tab. Linda, personal. He had known. He hadn't just left me love. He'd left me armor. I opened the folder again, fingers tracing the signatures, the clauses, the seals. My name repeated through every page, bold and unshakable. For the first time in months, my hands stopped trembling. Inside the house, the old clock struck 9. I could almost hear Robert's voice saying, Lock the doors, Lynn. Storm's coming. I closed the folder, exhaled, and turned off the porch light. 20 minutes. That's how long I had to decide whether to meet my son as a mother or as a woman, finally done being small. The phone buzzed again. Ethan. Traffic's light. See you soon. The wind moved through the chimes, softer this time, almost like a warning. I placed the green folder on the coffee table, next to Robert's framed photo. He was smiling in it, the smile of a man who knew things long before anyone else did. I touched the frame lightly. You built me a way out, I whispered. Now I just have to walk it. Out on the street, headlights turned the corner. Freedom waited, dressed like trouble. He arrived exactly when he said he would, 20 minutes after the text. The headlights swept across my driveway, sharp as a blade. I didn't bother turning on the porch light. Some part of me already knew that visibility didn't mean safety. Thanks, Mom, he said, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. 2 suitcases thumped against the floor. Just for a few days. I nodded, though I already knew what a few days meant. In this house, that phrase had never been about time. It had always been about permission. He poured orange juice straight from the carton, left it half empty on the counter, and kicked off his shoes in the hallway. The air shifted, the way it does when something heavy moves in. I watched him eat leftovers without asking, then stretch across the couch like a man claiming territory. The next morning came the first request. I've got an interview, he said, chewing toast I'd made. Need a decent suit, about $8.50. He said it like a fact, not a question. I wrote the check anyway. The week after that, he needed a phone, $1,200. It's an investment, he said. I wanted to believe him. Mothers are good at that, believing. I told myself it was temporary. He'd get on his feet soon. He just needed a chance. But the days stretched thin and empty, like my patience. It started small, the way control often does. Don't buy so much food, you waste it. Stop driving so much. Gas is expensive. You should let me handle the bills. You always forget things. The tone was polite, reasonable. That's how you miss the danger, because it wears the voice of concern. I nodded, agreeing to small things, not realizing each nod was another inch of surrender. One afternoon, I checked my bank account. The balance was lower than I remembered. A restaurant I'd never been to, an electronics store, a $400 charge labeled EZ Rentals. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. When I asked him, his voice was all patience. Relax, Mom. I told you I'd use your card until I get paid. It's my savings, I whispered. And it's for both of us, he said, smiling like that settled it. Don't make it weird. He said it kindly, and that was the worst part, how abuse hides in calm voices. I started hiding things. My favorite book under the couch cushion, a bar of dark chocolate in the flower jar, a $20 bill inside the hem of my pillowcase. It made me feel foolish and alive at once. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on the porch with the green folder Robert left me, the one that carried his voice in ink. His notes were precise, his instructions patient. Reading them was like hearing him breathe again. He'd built protection into the paperwork, as if he'd seen this future before I did. Inside, Ethan paced the hallway, his footsteps steady and sharp. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His control was quieter than shouting, like someone turning down the volume on my life. May called one morning. Her voice was sunlight through static. Lynn, honey, You've gone quiet. Let me come by. Before I could answer, Ethan appeared. Who's that? I mouthed May, but he took the phone anyway. Hey, May. Mom's fine. Just busy. She'll call later. Then he ended the call and handed it back. Don't get upset, he said. You stress too easily. The gentleness in his tone made me dizzy. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. Somewhere inside, the part of me that used to fight back curled into silence. That night, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. Small, tired, fading around the edges. You're still here, I told it quietly. You're still you. The wind moved through the chimes above the porch like a whisper of agreement. The next day, he called me into the living room. Mom, we need to talk. He sat with his new phone glowing in his hand, spreadsheets open on the screen. About your finances, he said evenly. You're forgetting things. It's safer if I handle everything. I stood there, hands trembling, but voice steady. Safer for who? For you, he said. You can't keep up with this stuff. He meant, you can't keep up with me. I wanted to tell him that I'd survived 40 years of bills, debts, mortgages, and loss, that I'd kept this house standing through every storm. But the words stayed in my throat. Years of motherhood had trained me to choose peace over truth. I looked at him, my son, my stranger, and felt something shift. The fear that had been feeding him was burning itself out. I'm tired, I said quietly. We'll talk tomorrow. He nodded, confident he'd already won. When he walked away, I noticed his laptop still open on the couch. One folder glowed on the screen. Accounts. I didn't touch it, but I memorized its name, its placement, the password hint in the corner. Carter, 1989. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark for a long time. The house felt smaller, but my mind didn't. That night, for the first time since Robert died, I locked my bedroom door. I lay on my side, staring at the shadows of the blinds cutting across the ceiling. The air conditioner clicked, the clock ticked, and outside, the desert wind sighed through the chimes. Fear, I realized, isn't always screaming. Sometimes it's silence, steady, calculated, waiting. And I was done waiting. I pressed my palm against the green folder on my nightstand and felt its weight. Solid, quiet, certain. Robert had left me more than paperwork. He'd left me a way back to myself. Tomorrow, I'd start remembering who I was before fear learned my name. And this time, when Ethan said, "We need to talk," I'd be ready to answer. Saturday mornings used to smell like pancakes and sun-warmed oranges. Now they smelled like fear wrapped in politeness. Ethan woke me early that day. His tone was almost cheerful, and that frightened me more than anger ever could. Come on, Mom, he said, tapping on my door. We've got to take care of some things at the bank. I sat up slowly, brushing my hair back. Bank? Why? He smiled, the kind of smile that sells lies as comfort. To make life easier for you. You keep forgetting stuff. Bills, passwords, that sort of thing. It's safer if I manage everything from now on. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The word forgetting hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to say I remember everything. I remember your first fever, your first broken window, your first apology you never meant. But I didn't say it. I just nodded and got dressed. At Desert Valley Bank, the air smelled of paper and cold air conditioning. The walls gleamed sterile and beige. I sat beside Ethan in front of a desk with a small brass plaque that read, Kyle Chen, Branch Manager. He had a polite, forgettable face, the kind that looks kind until it doesn't matter anymore. Ethan leaned forward. We're adding me as power of attorney. My mom forgets things. I just want to make sure everything's secure. Kyle nodded. Shuffling papers like this was a routine favor between families. I watched his hands, calm, practiced, detached. He slid a stack of documents toward me. Nothing unusual, he said. This gives your son permission to access and manage all accounts, transfer funds, pay bills, make withdrawals. It's common, especially for older clients. Older clients? The words landed heavier than they should. Ethan rested a hand on my shoulder. It was supposed to look affectionate, but it felt like pressure disguised as care. See, Mom? It's just paperwork. You trust me, right? My chest tightened. Robert used to say, trust was like a bridge. You don't test it by jumping on it. You walk slowly and listen for the creaks. Right now, every beam inside me was groaning. I looked at the pen in my hand. My reflection in its chrome surface looked small and blurred. Kyle, I said softly, what happens if I don't sign? He hesitated. Nothing, ma'am. But it's usually simpler when families help each other. Ethan chuckled, low and charming. Mom's just nervous. She hates paperwork. He wasn't wrong about that. I hated paperwork that stole your life one signature at a time. Ethan's hand stayed on my back, steady, firm. The heat of it made my skin crawl. I wanted to stand, to walk out, but I didn't. I told myself it was just a form, just convenience. I signed. My name looked strange, slanted, hesitant, as if it knew it didn't belong there. Ethan patted my shoulder. Perfect, Mom. You'll thank me later. Kyle slid the papers into a folder and smiled like a man finishing a transaction, not witnessing a theft. All set. Your son now has full financial authority. You can still view balances, but transfers and withdrawals will go through him. I nodded mechanically. My throat felt dry, like swallowing sand. In the parking lot, the heat hit like a wave. I leaned against the car, breathing through the dizziness. Ethan jingled the new key fob he'd just attached to his keychain. I'll handle things now, he said. You just relax. Relax. The word had never sounded so sharp. He drove us home in silence, humming under his breath. I watched the city slide past, the bright sky, the palm trees, the lives continuing as if nothing inside my world had changed. Back home, he poured himself coffee and turned on the TV. I sat at the table, staring at my hands. They weren't trembling anymore. That scared me most of all. Fear had turned into numbness. I'll move your direct deposit today, Ethan called from the couch. Pension, utilities, all that stuff. It'll be automatic. You don't have to worry anymore. He said it like a gift. But the word automatic felt like a cage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house barefoot, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the wall clock, the soft rustle of wind through the curtains. The air felt wrong, as if someone had rearranged its molecules while I wasn't looking. I thought about the way Ethan's shadow had fallen over my signature at the bank, the way it blocked the light. When Robert died, I had promised myself I wouldn't become invisible. Yet, here I was, dissolving quietly into my own life. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one Robert had sanded smooth with his own hands. I traced the grain of the wood until the ache in my chest slowed. For the first time, I let the truth form itself clearly in my mind. My son had turned me into his project, not a loved one, not a mother, an account to manage, an obstacle to control. Around midnight, I got up to make tea. When I reached for my phone to play music, the Wi-Fi had vanished. I checked the router. Small green lights blinked steadily, but the password no longer worked. I walked to the living room. Ethan's laptop glowed faintly in the dark. He was asleep on the couch, the new phone charging beside him. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Ethan, did you change the Wi-Fi password? He stirred, half awake. Yeah, it's safer that way. Too many scams online. Don't worry, I'll handle everything. Then he rolled over, his breathing evening out again. I stood there in the silence, staring at the blinking lights. Something inside me, something small and stubborn, shifted. He thought he'd locked me out, but he didn't understand that I'd spent my whole life learning how to survive without keys. When I went back to my room, the green folder sat on the nightstand. I opened it, touched the papers Robert had left, and whispered, "You built me a map, didn't you?" My hand stopped shaking. Tomorrow, I would follow it. The morning after Ethan changed the Wi-Fi password, I woke to a house that no longer felt like mine. The air smelled faintly of his cologne. My coffee mug had been moved, and the curtains were drawn too tight. I used to think losing a home meant moving out. I was wrong. It starts when someone rearranges your life and calls it help. Ethan sat at the table, laptop open, coffee beside him. "Morning, Mom," he said without looking up. I moved everything online. Bills, utilities, pension deposits. Easier for both of us. Both of us? That phrase had begun to mean him only. I tried to sound normal. "Did you take my checkbook?" He smiled, not even glancing up. "Yeah, I organized things. Don't worry, you won't need it anymore." I smiled back, a polite ghost of myself, and stirred my coffee until the spoon clinked like a clock ticking down. The days that followed blurred into quiet violations. My phone stopped working because of network issues. When I used the house line, Ethan appeared almost instantly. "Scam calls, Mom. Let me handle it." Packages began arriving. Furniture, lamps, a polished espresso machine I'd never asked for. "Just updating the place?" he said. "You deserve something nice." The house gleamed, but it felt hollow, like a hotel room I was allowed to clean but not live in. Even the air had its rhythm. One afternoon, I walked to a small cafe 2 blocks away. I ordered plain coffee, paid in cash, and sat by the window watching strangers live their unremarkable lives. For 20 minutes, I remembered what freedom tasted like. Bitterness softened by sugar. I nearly cried into the cup. That night, while Ethan showered, his laptop hummed softly on the couch. I didn't plan to look, but the screen blinked awake when I brushed past. An invoice filled the display. Oak dining set, imported rug, $12,940 total. The delivery address stopped me cold. Jefferson Street Apartments. I scrolled. More orders, appliances, furniture, light fixtures, all charged to my pension account. I stared at the numbers, numb. Another window showed mortgage paperwork for a new property under Jefferson Holdings LLC. I didn't need a detective to tell me whose initials hid inside that name. The shower turned off. My hands shook as I closed the lid. Ethan walked in, towel around his neck. "What are you doing?" "Looking for a recipe," I said softly. He grinned. "Good. Maybe make lasagna tonight." When he left, the silence roared. I sat down at the table, staring at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. I didn't see a mother anymore. I saw a mark. Later, I tried calling May. The call wouldn't connect. I tried Jordan Reeves, blocked. I checked my settings. Every number that could help me was gone. I asked Ethan about it that evening. He laughed. "Relax, Mom. I set up call filters, Scam protection. You should thank me. Thank him for cutting me off. That night, I ate alone at the kitchen table. He said he had a meeting, which I now knew meant something at that Jefferson Street apartment. I made instant noodles and stared at the steam. The air felt heavy with his absence, but not empty enough to breathe. I wondered, not for the first time, if he had ever loved me at all, or if love, for him, had always meant access. A week later, I found a stack of unopened mail in the laundry room. Bills, bank notices, one thick envelope addressed to E. Carter. I tore it open. My pension balance had dropped by another $50,000. Transfers appeared in neat, regular intervals to Jefferson Holdings, LLC. My chest felt hollow. When he came home, I was still holding the paper. "What's that?" he asked, setting down groceries. "Mail," I said. "You forgot to check it." He scanned it, then smiled. "Don't worry, Mom. It's just logistics." "Logistics," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He chuckled, putting the letter down. "You wouldn't understand. Financial stuff." For the first time, I didn't look away. I studied him. The calm posture, the rehearsed patience, and realized I was staring at a man who didn't see me as family, only as a resource. That night, I waited until he was asleep. The house glowed faintly under the blue of the rear light. I opened his laptop again, careful not to breathe too loud. This time, I didn't hesitate. I photographed everything: receipts, wire transfers, apartment contracts, even the email threads. My hands didn't shake. When I finished, I opened my old notebook, the one Robert had given me years ago for grocery lists. I began to write. Dates, sums, lies. I listed everything he'd taken, not just the money, but the hours, the trust, the laughter I hadn't realized was gone. The pen moved faster than I expected, the words spilling like truth, finally finding its way out. By dawn, the notebook was half full. I closed it gently, pressing my palm against the cover. It felt warm, alive, mine. Ethan's alarm buzzed in the other room. I stood, looked around the house, his new furniture, his gadgets, his order, and felt something shift inside me. The fear that had been feeding him was starving now. I whispered, "You built this prison, Ethan, but you forgot who taught you to survive inside small spaces." The wind outside rattled the chimes, a dry whisper of approval. I turned off the kitchen light and watched the first rays of sun touch the edge of the window. The house no longer belonged to me, but the story would, and I would make sure it ended the way he never expected, on my terms. I hadn't seen May in almost half a year, but she found me anyway. That's the thing about real friends. They can hear your silence from miles away. I was sitting in the corner of a grocery store cafe, pretending to read the newspaper. The smell of burned coffee beans hung thick in the air, the kind of scent that hides tired people. I didn't hear her footsteps until she spoke. "Linda Carter," she said, voice soft but steady. "If that's you behind those sunglasses, you owe me a hug." I looked up, startled. Her face hadn't changed much. Still round, still kind, still full of a patience I no longer deserved. "May?" I whispered. My throat felt raw. "You found me." "Sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug. "You weren't that hard to find. You only disappear when something's wrong." Her words cracked something open inside me. I tried to smile, but my lip trembled. We sat down with 2 coffees, hers with cream and sugar, mine black, as if I needed to punish myself. She studied me, eyes narrowing. "You've lost weight. Your voice sounds smaller. What's going on?" I wanted to lie, but the truth came out instead. Quiet at first, then spilling like floodwater. I told her everything. The account transfers, the Wi-Fi, the blocked numbers, the fake kindness that had turned into invisible chains. When I finished, she didn't say anything. She just reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was warm, grounding. "Oh, Lynn," she said softly, "you're not crazy. You're being robbed." The word robbed made my chest tighten. I wasn't a victim in a dark alley. I was a woman robbed in her own kitchen, one paper at a time. I whispered, "He's my son. And I'm your friend," she said, "which means I'm going to help you stop him." That afternoon, she drove me to Reeves & Co. I hadn't been back there since Robert's will was read. The same lemon polish smell greeted us, oddly comforting. Jordan Reeves met us in the small conference room, sleeves rolled up, expression measured. He listened without interrupting as I laid everything out: the power of attorney, the missing funds, the Jefferson apartment. When I finished, he leaned back, silent for a long moment. "Mrs. Carter," he said finally, "this isn't just mismanagement. It's elder financial exploitation." The phrase felt heavy, like a diagnosis. "Exploitation," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "It's when someone close, often family, uses control or deception to take financial advantage. It's theft with a smile." May's hand tightened around mine. "What can she do?" Jordan straightened the papers in front of him. "Plenty. We'll revoke the power of attorney immediately, freeze the remaining accounts, and begin collecting evidence. If he's using your pension for personal gain, we can pursue criminal charges." I swallowed hard. He'll know I'm fighting back. Jordan met my eyes. Good. He should. Something steady returned to my spine. For months, I'd been reacting, surviving. Now I was planning. After the meeting, May insisted we celebrate my courage with carrot cake. I laughed for the first time in months. It came out shaky but real. When she dropped me home, the sun was sliding behind the mountains, turning the sky gold and bruised. Ethan's car wasn't in the driveway. For once, I was grateful. I walked through the front door and let the silence settle. For the first time, it didn't scare me. In the kitchen drawer, under the dish towels, I found the small digital recorder I'd bought years ago to save Robert's voicemails. I turned it over in my palm, feeling its weight. A new kind of idea bloomed. I charged it, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and practiced pressing the record button without looking. My hands felt steady. "I'm going to take my voice back," I whispered to the empty room. That night, Ethan came home later than usual. He tossed his keys onto the counter and smiled too widely. "You didn't wait up, huh? Productive day?" "Very," I said. He poured himself a drink and started talking. Plans, investments, things I barely followed anymore. I nodded, listening, the recorder warm against my side. He talked about protecting our future, about leveraging assets. He didn't realize every word was being captured, every lie preserved in crystal clarity. When he finally went to bed, I sat at the table, rewinding the recording. His voice filled the tiny speaker, smooth, confident, cruel. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I smiled. The next morning, I met May for breakfast at the same cafe. She slid a folded napkin toward me. Inside was a phone number. "Detective Benton," she whispered. "A friend of Jordan's. He specializes in financial crimes. Call him when you're ready." "I'm ready," I said. And I meant it. That night, I emailed Jordan the photos I'd taken from Ethan's laptop. Every receipt, every transfer. My fingers no longer trembled over the keyboard. Before I went to bed, I left the recorder on my nightstand, its red light blinking softly in the dark. I thought of Robert's favorite saying, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, 'Try again tomorrow.'" And tomorrow I would. When I finally turned off the lamp, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace mixed with purpose. The house was still his on paper, but the power had shifted. I pressed my palm against the green folder and whispered, "Thank you, Robert." Then I looked toward the hallway where Ethan's door was closed and added quietly, "You have no idea what's coming." By Monday morning, I wasn't trembling anymore. Fear had done its job. It had warned me. Now it could step aside. I woke early, before the desert sun could burn through the blinds. Ethan was still asleep, sprawled on the couch with his laptop half open, a line of drool shining on the pillow. I made coffee quietly, slipped the small recorder into my jacket pocket, and left the house without saying a word. The air outside was sharp, already warming toward a long Arizona day. The sky had that clean, white clarity that makes everything look both beautiful and unbearable. I drove toward Desert Valley Bank, the same one where I had once signed away my power. Today, I was taking it back. Kyle Chen was behind the counter when I walked in. His polite smile faltered when he recognized me. "Mrs. Carter," he said, rising quickly. "Everything okay?" "Not yet," I replied, "but it will be." I followed him into his glass office, where the air smelled of printer toner and faint anxiety. I laid my folder on the desk. Inside were the photos, the bank statements, the proof of theft, each page lined up like soldiers ready for inspection. "I need to revoke the power of attorney," I said firmly. "Effective immediately." He blinked. "Of course. May I ask?" "My son has been using my pension to fund a property and purchases under his name. If he tries to access my accounts again, you'll notify me and only me. Is that clear?" Kyle nodded slowly, then turned to his screen. "Yes, ma'am. We can revoke the POA right now. I'll also recommend changing all security credentials." As he typed, my heart pounded, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I felt my pulse sink with the clicking of his keyboard. It was the sound of something unbinding. He handed me a new set of forms. "You'll need to sign here and here." My name flowed across the paper like it had been waiting to move again. When we finished, Kyle looked up. "Access revoked. All accounts secured. Starting now." I exhaled slowly. The air felt different, lighter, alive. "Thank you," I said. He gave a small, understanding nod. "It happens more often than you think. People take advantage of trust. Paper trails don't lie, Mrs. Carter. People do." I smiled faintly. That's exactly why I'm keeping one. Next stop was the copy shop 2 blocks down. I made duplicates of everything. Statements, receipts, his Jefferson apartment lease. I slipped them into a plain brown envelope marked for Detective Benton. The clerk, a young woman with purple hair and a nervous kindness, said, "Rough day?" "Better than yesterday," I answered, and meant it. By the time I got home, Ethan was still asleep. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, notifications flashing from names I didn't recognize. I watched him for a long moment. His face looked younger when he wasn't performing control. I almost pitied him. Almost. Then I walked past him, to my room, placed the envelope inside my dresser drawer, and wrote a note on a small square of paper. "Everything you've taken is coming back." I folded it once and tucked it into my journal. I didn't know if I'd ever show it to him. Maybe some messages are meant only for the universe. That afternoon, I met with Detective Benton at a quiet diner near downtown. He was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had seen too much and judged none of it. He listened carefully as I explained, then flipped through the evidence without expression. "You've done half my work already," he said. "We'll start with a report and file a notice to the Financial Crimes Division. It may take time, but we'll build a case." "Time is fine," I said. "I've already lost enough of it." He nodded, sliding my copies into a file. "You'll want to avoid confrontation until we've got this processed." I smiled wryly. "Detective, I've been avoiding confrontation my whole life. I'm done with that part." May, who'd insisted on coming, squeezed my arm under the table. "That's my girl," she whispered. Before we left, Benton handed me his card. "Keep documenting everything. Don't delete texts. Don't tell him you've done this. The more he talks, the better." "Oh," I said, touching the recorder in my pocket. "He's already talking plenty." When I got home that evening, Ethan was awake, pacing near the kitchen. "Where have you been?" he asked, voice sharp but curious. "Out," I said. He eyed me for a long second, then smirked. "You should tell me these things. I worry." I hung my jacket on the chair, making sure the recorder stayed hidden inside. "You don't have to worry anymore," I said, smiling just enough to confuse him. He frowned, then shrugged. "Fine. Dinner soon?" "In a bit." He wandered off toward his room, muttering something about phone calls and deadlines. As soon as he closed the door, I walked to the fridge, tore a sheet of paper from my notepad, and wrote 3 words in block letters. "Trust is earned." I stuck it to the empty refrigerator door and stared at it until the letters stopped swimming. That night, I took a deep breath and logged into my bank account. My balance stared back at me, smaller, but finally secure. I transferred the remaining $38,000 into a new account Jordan had set up under my name alone. For the first time in months, I felt ownership click back into place. Then I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop, labeled it Reconstruction, and began listing everything he'd taken: the withdrawals, the purchases, the furniture I didn't choose, the time I'd lost pretending this was love. The list was long, but the act of writing steadied me. Somewhere down the hall, Ethan coughed in his sleep. The sound didn't scare me anymore. Before bed, I took the note I'd written earlier and replaced it with another one. Shorter, simpler. I stuck it to the fridge again, right beside the first. It read, "Hunger teaches respect." I didn't know whether he'd understand it yet, but he would. As I turned off the lights, the house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a stage. And I was finally the one writing the script. The chimes outside caught the night wind, their sound clear and sharp. A song of warning or of freedom. Maybe both. Tomorrow, the fox would wake up to find the trap already set. The morning light spilled through the kitchen window like a blade. Clean, hot, and merciless. Phoenix sun had a way of showing everything you wanted to hide. I sat at the table, a mug of coffee cooling between my palms, staring at the note I'd taped to the refrigerator. Hunger teaches respect. The handwriting looked stronger than I felt, though maybe that was the point. I wasn't leaving messages for him anymore. I was reminding myself who I'd been before the silence started to feel like safety. Ethan's footsteps came slow down the hall, dragging, entitled. He squinted at the note, frowned, and yanked it down. What's this supposed to mean? Exactly what it says, I said without looking up. He tossed the paper into the trash. You've been acting strange. Secretive? I've been acting like myself, I said evenly. You just forgot what that looks like. He folded his arms, his tone suddenly managerial. We need to talk. Something's off with the accounts. The transfers keep getting rejected. That must be frustrating, I murmured. He tilted his head, studying me. Did you change something? I smiled faintly. Do you remember when you were 10 and hid cookies in your pillowcase? You thought you were clever, but I always found the crumbs. He blinked, confused, then angry. This isn't funny, Mom. No, I said softly. It's not. He started pacing, the floorboards creaking beneath his steps. You're sabotaging me. You have no idea how much I've done for you. You'd be lost without me. I laughed under my breath, quiet, brittle. You drained my account and called it care. You cut me off from my friends and called it protection. You don't help, Ethan. You consume. He slammed his hand against the table. You're ungrateful. I'm awake, I said. The words came out stronger than I expected, each one striking like a match. For years, I kept this house standing. I held your father's hand through sickness. I paid off debt you'll never understand. And somehow, you decided I was weak enough to own. He stared, his face caught between fury and disbelief. You're overreacting. You need help. Help? I said, laughing quietly. From you? The sound that escaped me wasn't madness. It was release. I walked to the refrigerator and pulled it open. The shelves were bare except for eggs, a half stick of butter, and a bottle of water. The light inside buzzed faintly. Ethan frowned. Where's the food? Gone, I said. What did you do? Teaching you what hunger feels like. He slammed the door so hard a magnet clattered to the floor. You've lost it. Maybe, I said, but at least I haven't lost myself. He backed away, crossing his arms. You've been talking to someone. May? That lawyer? You think you can turn them against me? I don't need to, I said. You've done that yourself. He blinked, realizing too late that something fundamental had shifted. I went to the counter, lifted a folder, and laid it in front of him. You might want to see this. He flipped through the pages, his breathing quickening with each one. Bank statements, invoices, the Jefferson Street mortgage, all paid with my pension. Where did you get these? He stammered. You left your laptop open, I said. It's strange how people who think they're in control are always the most careless. You don't understand, his voice cracked. It's an investment, a future for both of us. For both of us? I repeated. Show me my name on that lease, on the accounts, on anything. He had no answer. His mouth opened, closed, and stayed that way. I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. You have 48 hours to leave. This is an eviction notice, legal and binding. He didn't touch it. You can't be serious. I can, I said, and I am. He laughed, a dry, nervous sound. You'd throw your own son out on the street? I held his gaze. You threw me out of my life long before this. He stared at me, the weight of those words hitting something deep. Then his expression hardened. You'll regret this. No, I said calmly. You will. I turned toward the window. Outside, sunlight shimmered on the metal wind chimes Robert had hung years ago. They swayed in the heat, their sounds soft, almost approving. Ethan's voice came smaller now, trembling. I just needed help. No, I said gently. You needed control. You called it love because that's the only language you know. He looked down at the envelope. You always loved Dad more. I almost smiled. Your father built things. You just learned how to take them. For a long moment, we stood there. Two people connected by blood but separated by everything else that mattered. Finally, he said, You can't do this to me. I already did, I replied. And I'm not sorry. He grabbed his keys, muttering curses under his breath, and stormed out. The door slammed shut, shaking the frame. The silence that followed felt enormous. For a moment, I thought I might cry, but no tears came. Instead, I felt steady, almost still. The refrigerator hummed behind me, low and constant, as if the house itself were exhaling after holding its breath too long. I poured a fresh cup of coffee, stepped out onto the porch, and let the sunlight wash over me. The desert air was dry, alive, unforgiving. It tasted like freedom. The wind chimes above the door stirred again, their delicate sound threading through the quiet. I looked toward the horizon and whispered, It's over, Robert. I could almost hear his voice answering back, the same calm warmth I'd once taken for granted. Structure, Lynn. You always had it in you. I sat there a while, longer, watching the shadows shorten on the driveway, thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I was finally reclaiming. The world outside hadn't changed. Cars passed, dogs barked, a neighbor's sprinkler hissed. But inside me, something monumental had shifted. I wasn't a victim or a caretaker anymore. I was a survivor who'd stopped apologizing for surviving. I turned back toward the house, my house, and whispered, You'll find out, Ethan. You always do. The wind picked up again, and the chimes answered, ringing sharp and clear in the golden air. The sound wasn't mourning, it was victory. 3 days after Ethan left, the house still carried his shadow. Faint but stubborn, clinging to corners like dust. I could still hear the echo of his voice sometimes, bouncing around the silence. You'll regret this. But regret wasn't what I felt. What filled me was something stranger, quiet, unfamiliar peace. The phone rang that afternoon. It was Jordan Reeves. His tone was calm, professional as always, but softer now. Mrs. Carter, he said, there's something your husband left behind. A sealed letter. He instructed it be delivered only if certain conditions were met. Conditions? I asked. Yes, Jordan said. If your son attempted to exploit or control your assets. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Then, I guess he planned for everything. He hesitated. Robert always did. The next morning, I drove to the Reeves and Carter office. The air inside smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper, exactly the same as the day of the will reading. Jordan greeted me with a kind smile and handed me a cream-colored envelope, sealed in wax. The handwriting across it was unmistakable. For Linda, when the time is right. My hand shook a little as I broke the seal. The letter was written in Robert's steady script, neat, deliberate, as if he knew I'd be reading it through tears. My Lynn, if you're reading this, it means the plan worked. Or, at least, it protected you long enough for you to protect yourself. You always thought you needed saving, but you never did. You just needed a structure strong enough to stand in while you remembered who you are. I knew Ethan might come for what he thought he deserved. I saw pieces of it years ago. The small lies, the missing checks, the way guilt wrapped around you whenever he smiled. None of it was your fault. You love too fully, Lynn, and people like him mistake that for weakness. Don't carry that guilt anymore. You didn't fail him. You gave him chances he didn't earn. That is not failure. That's grace. If you're angry, good. Use it. If you're sad, let it wash through you. And when it's all done, forgive yourself. Because you, of all people, deserve peace. Remember what I told you once. True wealth isn't what you keep. It's what no one can take. Your dignity, your voice, your say. Love, always, Robert. I read the words again and again until they blurred. When I finally looked up, Jordan was watching quietly. He loved you with plans, he said softly. Yes, I whispered. He always did the quiet work. Driving home, the letter sat on the passenger seat, its presence strangely alive. The sky stretched wide and impossibly blue, the desert glowing gold under the afternoon sun. I realized I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost anymore, but about what I'd finally kept. At home, I placed Robert's letter inside the green folder, its final piece sliding perfectly into place. For the first time, that folder didn't feel like armor. It felt like a foundation. I made tea, sat on the porch, and let the wind move through my hair. I thought about Ethan, his anger, his excuses, his hunger. I wasn't angry at him anymore. Not exactly. Anger had burned itself out, leaving only understanding. Some people break everything they touch because they're terrified of being small. Robert's words echoed, "You gave him chances he didn't earn." That's grace. Maybe forgiving him wasn't about freeing him. Maybe it was about freeing myself. That night, the house felt warm again. I opened the window in my bedroom, let the desert air roll through, and set Robert's letter on the nightstand beside my ring. I whispered into the dark, "I forgive you, Robert, for leaving so soon." Then, quieter still, "And I forgive me for taking so long to live again." Sleep came easy. The next morning, I found a text on my phone. "Ethan, I'm sorry, Mom. I need help. A few thousand to get back on my feet. Please." My fingers hovered over the screen. Old habits whispered to answer, to rescue, to repair. For a moment, I even began typing. "You need to take care of yourself." But then I stopped. I thought of the letter, of Robert's voice saying, "You deserve big." I deleted the words. Instead, I typed one. "No." I hit send. The message went through immediately, the tiny check mark glowing blue. I waited for guilt to come. It didn't. Only stillness. I walked to the porch and sat down with my tea. The morning light slid across the floorboards, catching the edge of Robert's old wind chime. The sound it made was soft, pure, like breath finding its rhythm again. In the distance, the desert shimmered. Life went on. The mail truck groaned down the road. Children laughed somewhere beyond the fence, and the world, somehow, felt bearable again. Inside, the refrigerator hummed, the same steady sound that had once reminded me of captivity. Now it was just life, ordinary and real. I whispered, "True wealth isn't what you own. It's what you refuse to let others take." The words felt right this time, like a benediction. I closed my eyes, letting the sunlight touch my face, and smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood what freedom sounded like. It sounded like the quiet hum of a house that was mine again. 6 months later, the Arizona heat had softened into mercy. Mornings came light and cool, and for the first time in years, I woke without dread. Healing, I'd learned, isn't a finish line. It's the daily choice to stay in your own life. The case ended on a Tuesday that smelled faintly of rain. Tanya Mills, precise and unshakable, slid the final papers toward me. Restitution approved, pension restored, apartment forfeited. It's over, Mrs. Carter. Over. The word didn't mean what I expected. It didn't erase the past. It simply made room for the next version of me to exist. Detective Benton met me outside, offering a small nod. Paper trails don't lie, he said. For the first time, I heard it as comfort, not warning. At home, I laid the settlement check beneath Robert's photo. You were right, I whispered. Structure. The green folder on my shelf didn't feel like armor anymore. It felt like blueprint. We'd built an escape route together. His foresight, my courage. The house had changed. The new lock on the door clicked with quiet satisfaction. The Wi-Fi password lived in my own mind now. The wind chime under the eaves sang softly each afternoon, its notes lighter, as if the air itself had forgiven me. 2 weeks after the case closed, I put up a small card on the grocery store board. Room for rent, quiet house, references required. I didn't know who'd answer. I just knew the room needed to stop being a monument to loss. Her name was Kayla Brooks. Young, cautious, polite. I'm tidy, she said, and early to everything. She'd just escaped a bad roommate situation and worked at a plant nursery down the road. Something about her felt familiar. The way she kept apologizing for taking up space. The first night, she left a hand-knitted green blanket folded on the living room chair. For letting me stay, she said. I wanted to refuse the gift, but I didn't. The blanket was soft and sturdy, stitched tight, like faith made tangible. It reminded me that safety isn't built by walls. It's built by people who keep their word. A month later, I got a call from St. Mark's Senior Center. Would you lead a workshop? The coordinator asked. Boundaries, power of attorney, red flags, things you wish someone had told you. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote across a yellow pad, your voice, your say. When the day came, the church hall smelled like coffee and lemon cake. Benton stood quietly in the back. May handed out pens, her proud grin a beacon. I took the marker, faced the crowd, faces lined with years of endurance, and said, write this down. I'll read this at my pace. I need my lawyer present. Say it until your voice believes you. They did. Pens moved, heads nodded. A woman with a purple scarf raised her hand. What if it's your child? Then you're still the adult, I said. Your life is not a group project. Laughter rippled through the room, but it wasn't cruel. It was relief, the kind that follows truth finally spoken aloud. Afterward, Benton said, you turned evidence into inheritance. And I realized that's exactly what I'd done. Life became quiet in the best way. I kept small rituals, fresh flowers on Fridays, a new book each month, the expensive coffee I'd once considered indulgent. I planted rosemary near the kitchen. When the sun hit it, the air smelled like memory and rebirth. Kayla would come home from the nursery with her hands dirt-streaked, cheeks flushed from sun. Rent's on the dresser, she'd say, then add softly, it's not just a room to me. I know, I'd reply. It's not just a room to me either. Sometimes we shared dinner and silence, the comfortable kind. It struck me that this was what family could look like, something chosen, not owed. One evening, I found the old voice recorder tucked away in a drawer. I held it for a long moment before deleting the files, the shouts, the arguments, the evidence. I didn't need proof anymore. The system had heard me. I had heard myself. Freedom wasn't forgetting. It was not needing to remember to feel safe. The final Saturday of spring, I opened every window in the house. The air moved through like a baptism. The wind chimes sang above me, light and bright. The green blanket on the chair fluttered gently, a soft flag of survival. I walked through each room touching what had outlasted the storm. Robert's photo, the dented ring, the scar on the baseboard where Ethan once crashed a toy truck. None of it was perfect, but it was mine. I brewed tea, sat by the open window, and watched light spill across the floor. The world outside went on, dogs barking, sprinklers hissing, life humming along as if to say, "See? You made it." I thought of Robert's letter. True wealth isn't what you own, it's what you refuse to let others take. Your voice, your dignity, your say. I whispered it out loud, just to hear how it sounded in my own voice. It fit. The chime rang once more, a clean, silver note, then fell quiet. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness, it was peace. I looked around at my home, at the life rebuilt from ashes, and smiled. This was my legacy. Not revenge, not victory, just the simple, sacred right to live without permission. And for the first time, the house didn't feel like survival. It felt like freedom. They say revenge burns everything it touches, but maybe they're wrong. Maybe revenge, when done right, isn't fire at all. It's light, the kind that shows you the truth, warms your scars, and lets you finally rest in the home that almost broke you. I didn't destroy him. I simply stopped feeding the darkness that made him powerful. And in doing so, I found something better than victory: peace. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven? Or would you have let silence be your answer too? Tell me what you would have done. Not to judge, but to understand. Because sometimes, the only way to heal from betrayal is to talk about it out loud.